Hi everyone, so this video is going to be another book review on A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I waited for these covers to come out because I just thought that this artwork and cover work was so much prettier and cooler than the original one. I just really thought this was cool, and they all match, and all of the books in this particular edition match. So these books have been around for a while. I have known about Sarah J. Maas for years. When I started my booktube channel in 2014, so what was that, 7 years ago now? Good lord. I knew about her books. Back then it was the Throne of Glass books, but I don't know why I wanted to start with these books. These are new adults, so the characters, or the main character, is 19. Everything is just more, I haven't really read too many, or if any, new adult type books, and I really wanted to start getting into new adult books. So I thought I would start with this one because I also want to read Throne of Glass, so I'll probably get into those. Well, I will get into those after I read these. And I do know that these books, or all of Sarah J. Maas's books, they have a lot of mixed reviews. For like, people either love the books or people either hate the books. They think they're horrible, they think they're badly written, and I feel like it's so funny because when things get really popular, people tend to have really mixed reviews on things. So either it's like either or, and I like to go into anything just being like, okay, well, it's just another book, it's just another fantasy book, so I'm just gonna go into it not, expecting anything great, not expecting it to be bad, but not, overhyping it or underhyping it. And with this one, I do have tabs and whatnot in it, so I will say I gave this book an overall, like an 8.5 out of 10. The reason for that being is that it took me a really long time to actually get invested into the story and into the characters. When I say invested, it doesn't mean that it was boring up until I got invested. When I say invested, I usually mean that I wasn't like super obsessed with the characters until a certain point. And for this one, it was up until, this is going to be filled with spoilers, by the way, but I wasn't personally invested until Feyre got back to the Spring Court and discovered that Tamlin and Lucien weren't there. That's when I actually got invested into the story. Like I said, I've never really read new adult. I'm really used to just either reading like young adult books or like adult books, and I've noticed over the years and with all the books that I've read that there's a way that those books are kind of written. They're not all the same, but there's usually like in young adult fantasy books or in young adult dystopians, it's main characters introduced, main characters given like ungodly chosen one powers, or they are the chosen one, and then they have this task that they need to fulfill, and then with all the side characters, and then eventually, it gets fulfilled by the end of the book. With this story, I felt it was so interesting because, like I said, I'm not used to new adult, so I don't know if new adult books have that sort of kind of trope too. It gets so quiet when I stop talking because I record these in the middle of the night. So in this book, we're introduced to Feyre, we're introduced to her family, and a few chapters in, she gets kidnapped basically, and taken to the Spring Court. So for the first 200 or so pages of this book, it's basically Feyre just living in the Spring Court like mansion. It's just her day in, day out, eavesdropping on conversations. She is admiring the art on the walls, and she gets attacked by the creatures that she runs into in the or in the woods. And for the first 200, I wasn't bored. I was entertained by her like trying to figure things out, but I was like, there is no conflict. There's no I'm not being introduced to a reason for why she is either going to be stuck there forever. I mean, we knew that, but like, there's no, do you know what I mean? Like, there was no conflict up until, the actual conflict came, and then she learned the truth and whatever. And that's perfectly fine. The reason for why there was no conflict was very apparent. It was obvious and told at the end of the story because of the curse and Tamlin and like the whole thing. But I was like just waiting for something to happen in the first 200 pages. Then we get to page 234 and we meet Rysand. Rysand. I was pronouncing it Rysand in my head. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. So I didn't look up how these were pronounced properly. I didn't look that up. So spoiler alert to you and me, I guess. I do know that Feyre and Rysand end up getting together. That's all I know. I don't know any of the specifics. I don't know any of like the logistics of how that happened. I don't know anything besides the fact that they do get together at some point. I have a theory that they are actually mates, unlike Feyre and Tamlin just getting married and loving each other, but just getting married. I have a feeling that Rysand is her actual mate, but that's just a theory, based on like the end. I'll talk about it more. But yeah, so we meet him and he's an interesting fella. I was really into his character. I thought he was the most interesting character in this book, and I am excited to know that we are going to get like more of him in the next one, especially because of that deal that he made with Feyre in order to mend and heal her arm. So I'm like really excited, and he's kind of the reason that I'm like that I became really invested in the story, because I really like those characters that are like sarcastic and snarky and like act like they don't care, but they really do. I love those characters. Rysand is Amarantha's whore, and Amarantha is the woman who basically took over all of the land in a really bad way. And 50 years ago she messed with Tamlin, and Lucien is like, she's the reason why he lost his eye. And so obviously Tamlin is really afraid of him because he's really afraid of Amarantha, and he has come to love Feyre. So he's like, okay, so because he's like actually in love with her, he doesn't want her to get hurt, and she obviously doesn't know about like the curse that's on him. So he lets her go about 3 days before like the final day of the 49 years or something, like 7 days, 7 times 7, I don't know what. So she goes back home. She didn't think that she was going to be able to go back home, but she can't, but she does. And then she realizes that her family has been really well off, like they're somewhat wealthy. And she actually goes ahead and tells Nesta like everything. And I really did like that Feyre learned that Nesta actually went after her. You know, this time us and Feyre and like the reader, we figured that she just really didn't like Feyre. She didn't really care about her. So for Feyre to learn that Nesta actually got on a horse and went after her about a week later, that she was kidnapped, couldn't get through, but still went after her. I think Feyre really was like, okay, maybe my sister does really love me, like deep down, and she does really care about me. And so she trusts her, and she told her everything. And like, I was actually shocked during the part where because when Rysand met Feyre, she told him her name. She told him her name was Claire Better or something like that. And so Rysand, I guess, told Amarantha that, and like he was ordered, or he did it himself. They basically killed her entire family on their estate and tortured that poor girl. And so Feyre was like, oh my god, I basically got all these people killed, and I got this Claire girl killed and tortured. She's like, I need to go back to Tamlin. And it was at this point that I was like actually getting invested in the story. I was like, okay, what's going to happen next? Because things were starting to come to light. And that's when things really came to light, when Feyre, 2 days later, actually got back to the manor or whatever. I don't know what they were calling it. And Elise was telling her, actually told her about everything that happened, about the treaty. And so Feyre was like, it was just so much information, and I loved that part in the book because I love like information dumps. I love the point of a story where it's like, okay, well, here's all the information that I'm going to give you in order to keep this story going. I just love those parts. So I even wrote down, I'm like, on page 279, finally some context and backstory. I love these parts of stories. The part where Jurian tortured her sister made me shudder, actually, Amarantha's sister. And then also on page 282, there's some backstory onto what Amarantha did to Tamlin and Lucien specifically. And so for a minute, I was like, oh my god, Tamlin tricked her. He manipulated her. And he, like, in a way did, but he did love her, and he wasn't trying to manipulate her. He just literally could not tell her the truth. And he let her go 3 days before his 49 years were up. So he did actually love her, and Feyre was like, oh my god, he loves me, I actually love him, I need to go and save him. So that is when we go to Under the Mountain, and we are introduced to the tasks that she needs to do. When I say that those last 100 pages had me so hooked, usually I only read like right before bed with a cup of tea and like whatever else, and I'll just read for an hour or two before I go to bed. I was in my living room reading the last 100 pages like before dinner because I needed to know what happened. And so that's why I gave this book like a higher rating, because the end definitely made up for like the 200 pages that I was kind of like, okay, what's happening? So the first task, she had to fight this worm, and so my friend that I was talking to, I told her that I finally finished. She sent me this meme that I'll post here. Funniest thing, because I was literally thinking of like just a giant worm. Twas not that, apparently, but she ended up killing it. She passed the first task. She was able to succeed the first trial, you know, and poor thing is like shaking and shivering, and she like doesn't know what to do with herself. She's sitting in a freezing cell covered with mud and worm poop. She has a broken arm. She has like her tendons and everything is exposed. She's bleeding. She has no proper food or water, and like she's dying. She's literally dying. I did write down some notes in my book review journal that I have here. So the first thing that I wrote, yeah, I gave this book a 8.5 out of 10. So it was funny because on page 13, we're introduced, so they introduced Feyre's character, and her name is spelled F-E-Y-R-E. And I was like, I don't know how to pronounce that. So I looked it up, and then not a page later, they actually like told you how to pronounce her name, kind of like Hermione. And then of course we see the part where she killed the wolf. Tamlin in his like big fairy beast like form comes and kidnaps her, tells her the rules of the treaty, and she goes. And it was really interesting because when like I thought about it, it was kind of like a win-win scenario, because Feyre didn't really get along too great with her family. Her mom left her with this really hard, like she made her promise her to take care of the entire family, and her dad didn't really do anything. Her sister Nesta was really mean to her and didn't appreciate anything she did. Elaine was kind of an airhead. So she basically, and she even says that at the bottom of page 98. Let me find the actual passage. Let's see here, because I came to this conclusion and then I read her thoughts when she was saying it. Hold on. Yeah, so at the bottom of page 98, she says, my life was now owned by the treaty, but perhaps I've been freed in another sort of way. So she, like, her family was taken care of because of the treaty, and she also didn't have to be around them because she didn't really like them. I mean, they were her family, but like I said, Nesta was really mean to her. Her dad was kind of just like a lump on a rock. And then she got to live like her life in luxury in the spring court. By the way, I thought I would dress up in spring court fashion. I have this dress that I've worn once, that I wore to a wedding one time, and it has like a bunch of flowers and vines all over it, and I thought it was really pretty. And so day in and day out, we're kind of just like going along with Feyre for the ride. She has breakfast, lunch, and dinner and whatever with Tamlin and Lucien. And I thought it was really cute that on page 152, because we didn't really get to know Tamlin too much. We were learning more about Lucien in the beginning. Tamlin's character, like, she talks more to him and all that kind of later on. But there was a part that I thought was really cute, and he was like, oh, so you're interested in art, have you seen the gallery? And she's like, what? And he's like, yeah, so I'll get it ready for you, and then I'll take you so you can look at all of the art. And I just thought that was really sweet, because that was like one of her biggest like personality descriptors, was that she really loved art. She really loved to paint. She was really fascinated with color, which I really like that about her. So I really like that he was kind enough to be like, hey, so I noticed that you really like this thing. Is it okay if I like show you something that I think you would like? And I just thought that was very sweet. And then we learned more about Lucien's backstory, and all that. And then page 196 is Fire Night, when Feyre and Tamlin have that that first incident of theirs, that's one thing about new adult that I don't mind, but I'm not used to like those scenes in books. Like I said, I don't mind, so it's just gonna be fun to read these. And then apparently, like, I don't know, something about chapter 55, 54 in this one. I don't know what that means. We're gonna find out. I have a friend who read all of these books, so every time like I finish one or something crazy happens, I'll like message her and she's like, okay, what happened now? And then after that, so Tamlin like told her, Tamlin and Lucien told her not to come out of her room because like things would happen if she did. And what does she do? She comes out of her room and things happen and whatever. The next day, like it's like awkward, but then at one point Feyre goes ahead and shows Tamlin all of the things that she has been painting. So it was like the day at that pond with like the starlight or whatever it was, and they're just different like parts of her home. And so Talon is just like enamored by all of this stuff, and he loves her paintings, and he's like, I'm gonna keep this one. He absolutely adores them. So this scene where on page 335 I wrote down, Rhysand makes a deal with her and is like, hey, I'll fix your arm so you know you don't die. But you have to stay with me for 2 weeks every month for the rest of your life. Just like a little thing that you have to do for me. So she's able to bargain with him to be like, okay, just 1 week. So they do that, and she ends up getting like the markings on her, which she didn't know was gonna happen. I'm sure they looked cool, like it looks like a cool sleeve, but she has this like eye on her palm that like, it's like a link between Rhysand and her. And I, like, reading back, obviously he did this for a reason. Like, she needed to survive. And so we just got a lot of scenes between Rhysand and, what's her name, and Feyre. And, like, it was interesting because he was, according to Feyre at the time, he is the enemy, right? And he was playing with her, and he'd manipulate her a little bit, and he was toying with her, but he never actually hurt her. So we know that he gives her this mark, but it turns out that that mark basically, like, because of like I said, the thing on her palm, it helped her survive the second trial. Like, if it wasn't for that, she would have died, and Lucien would have died, because he was the one who like made her hand burn when she touched the wrong lever.
Pull the lever, Kronk.
And yeah, so we just got like a lot of scenes between Feyre and Rhysand. And like I said, he was messing with her a lot, but he never actually hurt her. So he put that mark on her, but it ended up saving her in the second trial. As we know, these trials took over a 3-month period. So for the times that he visited her, he would mark her up in all that paint, and he would make her drink that wine, and she would just pass out. So when I first read that, I was like, oh my God, he is completely violating her. That is so wrong. But then you realize, okay, well, it was a way for her to kind of escape. He never touched her past her arms and like her waist a little bit. And she even mentions that. I wrote that down somewhere. Where did I say that? On page 370. Hold on, let me get there. Page 370. Yeah, she says, a permanent darkness settled over me, and I began to look forward to the moment when Rhysand gave me that goblet of fairy wine and I could lose myself for a few hours. So he was literally like keeping her sane and keeping her safe and keeping her like intact. And I had to wonder, like, why? Like, what is his motive? Number one, why is he so attached to the hip to Amarantha? And all these questions get answered. But it was just so interesting because I was like, why is he doing all of this for her? He's messing with her, and she, like, doesn't necessarily want his help, but he is kind of, like, helping her. Because of the spoiler that I know that they actually get together, I like to think that that was, like, a good foundation for their relationship, was that he never intended to actually, like, do any wrong to her. And on page 356, Feyre is even questioning his actions and asking, like, why is he even doing all that for her? So we know that the second trial is the lever thing, so she passes that. Oh, and then we finally get that scene between Rhysand and Feyre when he goes into her cell, and he basically like tells her, he's like, oh, well, I'm lonely and this and that. And so he kind of just like vents and tells her like the reason why he's doing all of that. So the third trial, and let me just say that these last 100 pages were like legit brutal to read, because everything that she was going through was so hard. And it wasn't just like a 1, 2, 3 thing. She was in a cell and being manipulated and being like taken control of for 3 months. For 3 months, she was tortured like this. So that was just like, that was like a lot to take in, because I was like, this poor girl. But I gained a lot of respect for her, because I was like, she's really like holding it down and like keeping herself going as much as she can. So the third task, I was freaking out because I thought that one of the so they brought the 3 innocents in, right? And I legitimately thought for a second that it was going to be her 2 sisters and her dad, but then they said it was 2 men and a woman. And so I was like, okay, but I think the woman might be her sister Elaine. And so I was freaking out. Turned out not to be that. That would have been interesting though. I think that would have been interesting. But almost, if not worse, the third man was, so she literally has to murder these 2 innocent fairies. And that was definitely one of like the most horrible things that Amarantha could have done to her, because she wasn't innocent and she cried the first day that she killed a rabbit when she was younger. So for Amarantha to force her to kill 2 innocent fairies, 2 innocent people, like it destroyed her. And then it's discovered, and then it's revealed that the third person is Tamlin. Like, what? But then Feyre made the realization that Tamlin had no heart. So I don't know the actual, like the full story with that. Maybe I read it too fast. He has a heart of stone. So Feyre stabs him in the heart, but he doesn't die. But what I was not expecting was that Amarantha was actually going to kill Feyre. I was like, what? I'm like, what do you mean you're seeing your body and your neck is like in a weird position? What are you talking about? But apparently Amarantha killed Feyre. But as soon as Feyre did, I just think that's such a pretty name. It's such a fairy name, Feyre. I think it's so pretty. But anyways, the one thing that I did think was interesting. So as soon as Feyre stabs Tamlin, all of the fairies get their magic back. The masks fall off. Because, you know, they had masks. And so Tamlin murders, straight up destroys Amarantha. He like chomps her entire neck out. I was like, bravo. My phone died, so I have to use my camera. But I did think it was really interesting, like plot wise, that they were able to bring Feyre back. I didn't feel that there was a lot of foreshadowing for that. There wasn't a lot of like hinting at the fact that that could even happen. Usually in fantasy books and whatnot, it's, if there's going to be some kind of resurrection that's implied in the magic somewhere, even in that scene where Feyre was in the library and she was looking at the painting, in that scene I was expecting for Tamlin to kind of sit down and like tell her the history. That wouldn't have broken the treaty. He was just telling her the treaty of like, or he was just telling her the history of like fairies. So I was expecting that, did not get that. So I was just surprised really that they were able to like bring her back to life, because that kind of resurrection power or history just wasn't foreshadowed at all in the book before that. Obviously not that I was mad that that happened, but I was just like shocked. And then at the very end, so not only was she resurrected, but she was also created and made into a high fae. So she is now immortal. She is now, you know, stronger. And it was really funny because that scene at the end really felt like the end of Breaking Dawn when Bella becomes a vampire and she's like discovering her new body. I thought that was funny. But yeah, there was just no like foreshadowing really as to them bringing her back, and then for them turning her into a fae, which I guess makes sense because they all witnessed like what she did, and I'm sure they wouldn't have been like, hey, we're gonna bring her back, but we're gonna make her human so that, you know, she dies in 80 years and then, you know, this is all for nothing. But yeah, let me know if anybody else had that same thought, because I thought that was interesting. And then at the very end, it actually ends very quickly after she's brought back to life, and we have a scene between her and Rysand because she still has that mark on her body, and she still needs to go and stay with him. And so there's a part where she's talking to him, and you know, he has his wings, which I just thought were really cool. And when he like bows to say goodbye to her, he like his eyes widen and he stumbles. And Feyre was like, what the heck? He actually just stumbled. So like, what was that? Number one. And that was when so they didn't talk about it because, again, Twilight reference, like the whole imprinting when like the werewolves lock eyes with their soulmate or whatever, the person that they're supposed to be with. I wonder if that's like a thing with fairies. Tamlin didn't really go into it when he was talking about his parents who were mates. Him and Feyre never had like a moment, but I have a theory as to that he stumbled when he looked at her because maybe he realized that she was his mate, or he realized that he maybe had feelings for her. I don't know. That's my theory, but like, what made him stumble? Like, oh, and side note, the riddle, I guessed the riddle like 5 seconds after I read it. I felt so smart and I was so proud of myself. So the riddle is, there are those who seek me a lifetime but never we meet, and those I kiss but who trample me beneath ungrateful feet. At times I seem to favor the clever and the fair, but I bless all those who are brave enough to dare. By large my ministrations are soft-handed and sweet, but scorned I become a difficult beast to defeat. For though each of my strikes lands a powerful blow, when I kill I do it slow. And after I read that, I was thinking for a good like 10 seconds, and I was like, oh my god, the answer is love. And then at the end, Amarantha said that, or no, Feyre said that when she was dying, like 2 seconds before Amarantha killed her. And I was like, hey, I was right. Feyre's dead, so that sucks, but I was right about the riddle. So yeah, those were all the notes that I had for when I was reading through it. And I kind of just talked about everything else too. The questions that I have for the end of the book, I did start, so I actually do have, oh, come here. I do have this one. I read about the first 4 chapters so far, so I'm going to keep reading it tonight. It's significantly bigger. It's like a good 200 pages longer than the first one, so I'm excited to get into that. But the questions I have is, she's a high fae now, so how will she be able to manage and handle her new body? How will her and Tamlin's relationship be like moving forward, just as a married couple, but also when like Rysand comes into the picture, because, you know, I was spoiled by that and I know that's going to happen. And then what will happen when she goes with Rysand for the 1 week, and what will be the new conflict? Who will be the new villain since Amarantha is dead? But yeah, I was really I was really impressed with Feyre's character and her character development in the last 100 pages. I feel like she was already, because usually in like YA fantasy, the chosen one is like already so strong and so sure of herself. And so I thought it was really cool to see Feyre, who was just a girl, you know, who didn't really like hunting but had to, trying her best to provide for her family, and she wasn't like super special, and she also still isn't super special. She's not like some chosen one character. She proved her abilities with those 3 tasks in the 3 months that she basically was like tortured and had to fight for her life and for her High Lord and for, you know, all of that. So I thought it was interesting to see her like her character really fight through all that. So that's one of the things that I'm most interested to see in this next book, is to see how she changed as a character. And already in the first 4 chapters of this book, I did notice that she does have PTSD. She's had nightmares. She doesn't like the color red because it reminds her of blood. It reminds her of the marks that she saw in Claire's body. It just reminds her of like really bad things. And so I did like that. And like I said, I really did think that the end of that book made up for all of it. And my friend even told me, she's like, yeah, this first book is like the beginning of just a whole bunch of crazy. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm really excited to read this. I am actually very invested now. I'm really looking forward to getting more of Rysand's character, because I'm usually not into, I don't know what that was. I'm usually not into like those bad boy kind of characters, but like, I'm very interested in Rysand, and I want to know more about it. But yeah, I think that is all I have to say about this first book. Like I said, I am reading the next one. I'm going to have to buy the next 3 or the next 2 full books to keep going. So those are going to be my future videos. I have a couple other ones that I'm going to post too. But yeah, like I said, I gave this book a solid like 8.5, between 8.5/9 out of 10. I really did enjoy it. I'm super excited to keep reading the series. But yeah, I would love to know what you all think of these books. If you've read them, do you plan on reading them? Who is your favorite character? Thank you all so much for watching. Please leave any comments down below, and I will see you in my next video. Okay, bye.